You recently wrote an article calling out a key leadership behaviour you see in politics and corporate settings, where leaders are trading engagement and trust for faster, easier preparation. You call bullshit on the overuse of PowerPoint slides, presenters giving too much detail, using generic scripts, and the lazy use of AI. What would you say to leaders and employees who are hesitant to break away from these traditional presentation norms?
They are seriously at risk of not engaging the way they think they should and want to. They're at risk of being misjudged and not being trusted and known for the person that they really are. And that's a serious risk. If people are presenting externally, we see this in pitches, right? Often the point of difference is difficult, right? So point of difference might just be the culture of the organisation. But if you're not showing up being you, if you're giving corporate rhetoric and horribly detailed slides and or scripts, you're at risk of falling back to the pack. I saw an insurance firm a couple of years ago where I was brought in, CEO, woman, fantastic, and the rapport with her leadership team was just amazing, and their banter, their great respect for each other. But when they turned up to rehearsals, they went into this presentation mode, and I just sat there and said, "You're leaving arguably your greatest point of difference outside the boardroom. Why would you take that risk?"
Yeah, I've seen that so much. When I entered the corporate world 25 plus years ago, that was common. It was like, ladies and gentlemen, when you step up to present, like, leave your shoes if there's dirt on them and leave your personality out the door. And everyone was this carbon copy. Today's presentation, we're going to go to the slides. I was hoping that it would have changed. I really was hoping you were going to come in here on your big pony and tell us, ladies and gentlemen, King Tony is in the house. Corporate comms has really evolved, but it hasn't.
I think it's gotten worse, Andrew. I think it's gotten worse. I mean, you think about it, we're in a risk-orientated environment. Presentations have to be seen by the lawyers. They've got to be vetted first before they can be, presented externally. Everyone's, scared of sound bites. So I get all that. Then you've got another issue, which is time, right? People are busy, but they use that as an excuse. So it's like, can you write a script for me? Can you prepare some messaging for me? And it's like, hang on, it's your presentation. You've got to own it. You've got to know what you want to say. So I know there are reasons for it, but the problem's gotten worse, and that's why that's why I wrote the paper.
Well, it's why you're passionate more than you've ever been.
That's it.
I have a cognitive and an occupational bias for this discussion today. I present 50 plus keynotes from big stages of 15,000 to
and you were so natural when you do it.
Now. Yeah, let's come back to that now.
Okay.
I had a presentation when I was 24 or 25 at the Sydney Convention Centre, which is now ICC, and it was freaking horrible. We'll come back to that.
Okay.
So if we set the problem, Tony, for most people when they present, they get nervous. They feel the pressure to perform. They become robotic. We get in our heads and in our own way, and our emotions get the better of us. We have emotions, but we get had by our emotions. We then lack confidence, the clarity in message. We lead with the data and not from the heart. Oh my God, I got a few examples from perhaps consulting firms that I may have worked with on that. The audience is then tired and they're distracted and bored, so they'll grab their mobile phone. I think our audience knows this feeling and they're familiar with it. We've all been to presentations like this. And also the big thing I say for everyone listening to this, if you want to improve your presentation skills, listen to the big guy, Tony, but stop making it about you. And that's a big thing, to control your nerves, to control the message and try and enjoy it. So you say in your paper, and we'll put the show notes, Wiz, to a link to that article. It's a great one. It's called It's a Matter of Trust. You say ban scripts and any form of longhand notes. Ban slides that make full sense as a document. They are not slides. Determine the key messages. Let presenters use their own words and let presenters use their own examples.
I do say that. I do. That's what it takes. But it's not about winging it. Look, so let's back up a step. Presenting is not easy. I get nervous, right? I spoke in front of 400 people in the US last year, big client event, so nervous beforehand. But that's life. It's part of the deal. F1 drivers get butterflies. You can't tell me they don't sit on the grid without butterflies in the tummy.
Nerves is part of the performer's routine, and there's a ramp up.
Totally.
And you don't want to be super nervous the night before. You want to feel a bit of a flutter when you think about it and then detach and distract yourself. The morning of, say if you've got an afternoon or an evening event, but then that last channel in the last 60 to 90 minutes, so it's a cliche, but we all have nerves. You just want to line them up rather than them lining
and embrace them.
Up. Yeah.
I hear actors, like top drawer actors talk about, I don't get nervous, I get excited. It's the same bodily function, but they see it in a positive way. I think the other issue, Andrew, though, is, yes, some people love it, less than others. And I see, the full spectrum of feelings towards presenting. But people are thinking often that longhand notes, super detailed slides will help them and make them feel better. It actually doesn't.
Well, then they are trying to memorize and then they forget. I've seen this, and you've seen this a lot more than me. They start and then the person's thinking, I've learned this, and then they skip a step. I've actually seen people freeze.
Yeah, totally.
And not know what to do. Whereas if you have a picture or a slide, and you can give us some of your tips, but be a bit flexible. Like, do your reps and sets of material.
Bullets.
And then interact.
But then there's the concept. See, what I've been saying for years now is people spend too long in preparation at the keyboard, right? Rehearsing. Not rehearsing. That's the whole point. Editing slides, editing notes. And I often say, come on, we've got to rehearse. And no, I'm not yet ready to rehearse. And there's an irony in that, because you're never going to be ready to rehearse. The whole point of doing it is to get in a room and see what happens, see how you're going to say it. Because the other problem with notes is people all write differently to the way they speak. Everybody. I mean, I came from advertising, right? To find a writer who could really write in day-to-day speak was rare. So people are crafting wonderful documents, but that's not how they speak. And so they're going into a false language. That makes them more nervous. They're uncomfortable because of that. So I'm trying to get people to go to rehearsal faster. And get through this thing of I'm not yet ready to rehearse, except that you're not going to be ready. I mean, I do a few notes and I just get on my feet, possibly a glass of Pinot in my hand, and I figure out, what am I going to say? And I'm still editing.
Yeah, let me pull that apart, because you and I, we said this before we go on, we'll talk and wax lyrical for hours.
Well, you'll talk for hours.
So
I'm
periodically,
shy. Come on.
I'm going to press the pause button and try and unpack what you just say so elegantly and so effortlessly. If we divide speaking into two parts, there's the preparation, there's the presentation.
Yeah. Everyone knows their content, right? Usually, as you say, sometimes we're putting together new content. But the step before that is to know what your messaging really is. Forget how you're going to say it, just to know what are the messages you're going to get across. I would argue that most presenters lack focus. And I've often said, Andrew, the more knowledge people have, the less focus they have. Because
What do they lack?
They lack... Wiz, can we get someone else in here to do this? They're wedded to their content, and they don't really know what their value proposition is in the messaging. I mean, I hear most presentations end without a conclusion, right? Without an ask. So they've not got that sense of purpose. So if you can fix that, that has a huge effect on people's confidence, because it's like, I know why I'm walking into the boardroom tomorrow morning or Monday morning or whenever. So that's one part of it, and then to build out content, that supports that. But it doesn't, again, have to be scripted. One of the issues here is there are too many cooks in the kitchen, because we've got all sorts of backroom people then building out the collateral, which gets dangerous. Gets really dangerous.
Just thinking about how we prepare, and Angela, who I run the business performance intelligence with, has a background from consulting, 15 years. And Angela, she'll be fine with me saying this, but I've retrained Ange, because when we used to do a presentation, she'd go straight to the laptop, straight to putting PowerPoint together. And I used to just flip. I'd go, no, this is the final part. I do it on a whiteboard and paper.
Yeah.
And go, right, what are the key messages? So I'll reverse engineer.
Yep.
What do we want people to
start.
feel?
That's right.
What are the messages we want to land? What's the story? Then I'll construct it. Just want to check this with you. Similar process to
Barbara Minto's pyramid. That's the pyramid.
Barbara Minto's pyramid.
Barbara Minto's pyramid. She created it. She was a McKinsey woman. She created the pyramid in relation to writing documents. I looked at it and said, a couple of little mini changes. You can actually apply it to any conversation. And I mean, so we use the words conversation, discussion more than we use the word presentation, because it's all the same, right? And
so who's Barbara Minto? And I'm using her pyramid. I didn't even realise it.
Look, she's probably retired and got more money than you and I put together. I don't know about you, but she's out of the scene these days. But she was an early leader in the McKinsey world, and she said for writing documents, this is a faster way to do it. So it is about speed. We can reduce people's preparation time by half. Ooh. If they start with messaging first rather than building up from content and slides first.
Okay.
That's a game changer.
Can you just say that again? That's the punch.
We can reduce people's preparation by half if they start with the messaging first, because it helps you determine what needs to be in there and what doesn't need to be in there. You know that the great line. I didn't have time to write a short presentation, so I wrote a long one.
Mark
right?
Twain, apologies that this letter was a 6 or 8 page letter. Apologies, this letter is so verbose. I didn't have time to make it.
That's right. So you've got to stop and think, okay? So that your benchmark's got to be, well, where are we trying to come out? What's the intent of message? And then you work backwards, exactly as you said before. But then it's jumping. So my analogy these days is I talk about, a cooking analogy. On the kitchen bench, you've got all the ingredients for a wonderful meal. Your content, your slides, your notes of some sort, they're the ingredients. But there's no sizzle. There's no sizzle at that point. The sizzle only comes when you turn the flame on and you start putting things in, and the point is you're still cooking at that stage. So people look at rehearsal as being I've got to have my presentation perfect before I can go to rehearsal. No. You're still cooking it and building it. You'll hear yourself in a rehearsal and go, that opening that I've sort of kind of bullet pointed on the whiteboard doesn't make any sense now that I've said it out loud.
I don't even argue. And some of the musicians I've worked with will say this. They perform 30 to 50 gigs and then they feel like they've got that level of mastery.
Yeah, that's
not
right.
final mastery, but a level of mastery.
Totally.
To be both present on the instrument and the vocals, but also to interact with the audience. And I find that if I've got a new presentation, my process is very similar to yours. It's interesting, it's aligned. But then I'll craft it by doing paid work. So I think it's getting into a stage where I know it's good enough to deliver. And then the next iteration, the real tightening, probably that final 10%, is from taking it to market.
Well, it's interesting that you say it because you've got to remember, one of the things at Bulmer Group, we're really hung up on giving practical advice. So one of the things we're trying to acknowledge and just say, look, it is what it is helping people feel better 80% cooked. Right? Because we don't live in a perfect world, right? We really don't. And so a lot of people are getting a day's notice for a meeting that they could have arguably done with a week's notice or 2 weeks' notice. So it is the way it is. But you just mentioned something. You talked about focusing on the audience. So we talk about being audience-centric. So when I get nervous, it's partly because I'm focusing on myself and thinking, okay, do I know my stuff? And, do I look all right in this shirt and what have you? That's where nerves come from, is when we...
And the more nervous you get, the more insular we become, because it's a dance, because there's the term faux pas. One of the basic defaults of the human brain is we want to belong.
Yes.
So we have fear of other people's opinion.
Yes.
So we're worried about what they think. So then we bring it internal.
Yes.
I hardly know anyone who would be sitting in an audience wanting the presenter to stuff up.
Totally. And so one of the interesting things when I'm coaching presenters and when I'm critiquing them, I'm often sitting at the back of the room. So obviously I'm looking at them, but I spend a lot of time looking at the audience. And I often have to I'll often say to someone, Andrew, did you see what happened when you told that story? And usually the answer is no, I didn't see anything at all. I was observing people sitting there just so engaged, but the presenter's not seeing that. So being audience-centric, one, makes you a better presenter, but it actually is the key to relaxing. I say to people all the time, I cannot get rid of my nerves on my own. Right? I need feedback. And even feedback if it's Tony, look, I agree with some of what you're saying, but I do have a concern. I love that because it says they're interested. So we can have that conversation. So getting out of our own head and focusing on the humans that are in front of us is the key to relaxing and enjoying the conversation.
And when I say to you, where's the evidence? There's a little bit with your background, having seen and or delivered over 10,000 presentations. So you put a really good video on LinkedIn recently talking about the importance of this, taking into account not just the audience, but the state of your audience. This one totally aligned with me because we use similar language. You are a brother from another mother. You said,
I want you to think about, one, the emotional state and physical state of an audience, because they might be tired. They might be feeling a bit low-key, be it late in the week, late in the day, just because of whatever activities have been going on in their world. And also to think about how you feel. I mean, it's quite possible that late in the week, if you're speaking to a group of people in a boardroom, at a conference, they're tired, but you're actually feeling the same way. And in fact, I would consider reflecting that. So I would often start sitting down on a stool just like this, or sitting at a boardroom table. And what I find when I sit is I tend to be quieter, I tend to be less animated. Now, I'm not going to stay that way for the whole 45 minutes or however long I'm presenting, and you can't, but it's a great way to connect. And once you've connected, you can then take them on a journey. I saw a guy, I'm a stealer, Andrew. I steal ideas from people, and now I'm going to...
I'm going to correct you, because you don't steal.
I borrow.
Okay, that's a theft.
Okay.
you
wrote the
adapt
E-Myth.
ideas
Who
from
was
other
the guy?
people.
He wrote the E-Myth. Michael Gerber. Michael Gerber. So years and years ago, when I was a one-person business, a friend of mine who was in a senior position rang me and thought I had no idea how to build a business. He rang me and said, "What are you doing on Wednesday?" I said, "Nothing." He said, "Okay, great. You're going to see Michael Gerber. We've got tickets. We're sponsoring the event." This is years ago.
Was this here at the?
It was in Pitt Street. No. It was somewhere in Pitt Street. I can't even remember. And it was a horrible, wet, rainy day come the Wednesday, and it was all day, right? All day, just Michael Gerber. Who's Michael Gerber? He said, "Oh, he's an American." I went, "Oh, here we go. Praise the Lord."
Entrepreneur, technician, manager. There's three parts to every business.
Correct. That's exactly what he's about. But I wasn't really in a receptive mindset. So I was going with an idea of being there for an hour, then I'll chuff off because my friend wasn't going to be there. Michael Gerber walked out on stage, handheld mic, sat on a stool. We were all late getting there. It was just traffic was terrible, and he very, very calmly spoke. And two things. One, he said some things that I thought, this guy's got a video camera in my office, right? Because I'm doing all these mistakes that he's talking about. But he was really calm. He wasn't in my face. And I thought, I actually like this guy, right? Now, it was a complete false sense of security because half an hour later, he was running around the stage and carrying on. But he taught me, he doesn't know it, but he taught me about this concept of go to where the audience is physically and emotionally. Because 1980s was very much, if you're a first speaker after lunch, you're going to have to really rev them up. It's a complete disconnect. So so people ask in advertising. We always talked about when's the best time to make a presentation. The answer to that question in this day and age has to be whenever you can get the diaries to sync. So, is 4 o'clock on a Friday a great time to have a really serious discussion or presentation? Of course not. But it is what it is. So your opening line in a 4 o'clock meeting probably would be, guys, whose idea was this? This is a terrible time to have this discussion, and everyone would sit there and go, yeah, I get it.
The only time between you and drinks is me.
That's right. That's what people say. So it's being the whole principle behind our coaching is be real as a presenter. Be real with your audience. Don't try and be word perfect. Just be real, and that's where you win.
I reckon it took me 15 years. I started doing a lot of presenting in my mid-20s in Hobart when I had a business, but I reckon it was until my early 40s, more than 15 years, to actually be comfortable being me. Because I saw Michael Gerber and I saw John McGrath, and they bring out all these people in the summit. You would have been in a similar audience, and the big Americans like Bob Proctor and all this stories. And I thought, gosh, I need to do something or have a disability. Like, I was just a normal guy. Yeah. Honestly, I think I needed to go through some adversity or have some challenge or do something amazing. I had this really weird link. If I become an Olympian, I'll then be able to have a keynote speaking business because then I've got then something to hang on. Totally ridiculous, totally skewed. And then it just took me, going through a few life challenges, cancer and a marriage breakdown, not far apart from each other, to then get real, like with myself, and then to actually start talking to audiences. And I can remember the first time I did it, mate, where I actually spoke about not what was great in my life, but what was shit. And I had more feedback, and it wasn't a sob story. It was just that life's full of ups and downs, highs and lows, trials and tribulations. And people came up and said, I really like the authenticity. And I went, oh, fuck. Why did I spend my mid to late 20s and most of my 30s with this facade trying to be someone I'm not? So if anyone listening or watching, if you can learn that from a young age, my gosh, you're going to be decades ahead of where I
Andrew,
was.
I and if I've told you this, but we've created a non-presentation skills program because there's an irony, right? People have loved our positioning of be yourself, be natural. They've always loved that. So they loosen up straight away. But it opens a little bit of a Pandora's box because it raises the question, are people really comfortable in their own skin to then show up and be that person in any forum? And, like you've said, I'm the same. It's been a journey to get to that point of comfort, and it's an ongoing journey. So we've created a program, a self-belief program, because I see so many people for whom they don't need any more skills. They just need a turbocharger of self-belief to use and explode the skills that they've already got. But it's backing themselves, and it's called getting out of our own way because that's the issue. It's not the audience's fault. It's us that we don't back ourselves.
One of my favourite songs from U2 is that, Get Out of Your Own Way.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah.
For people listening, we've spoken about the evolution of your business, my business, but let's say someone has just started or they're mid-range presenting and they've got a presentation coming up next week. I want to talk about research and we'll talk about some other stuff as well. But how would you summarize to go about blank canvas, got a new presentation coming up, give me the bullet point steps. So even take me through a coaching example. If I came to you or a team came to you and said, hey, we've got a pitch, we've got a presentation, what's the framework, if you can summarize for me in a few bullet points?
So the starting point in a coaching context is always, I want to know, how do you feel about presenting? I need to get inside your head. I need to know how this experience is for you.
I love it personally, but I am a bit different to a lot of our audience. Let's say I've had a bit of experience with presenting. Some have gone well and some have not been great at all.
So we get all those answers, right? And we get, we probably get more answers saying, I don't love it, but I need to do it. I want to do it. I always ask that question, would you like to be able to do it? By the way, what's interesting is, and I shouldn't say this publicly because that moment is those minutes are really important to us because we're seeing that person without their presentation hat on. So we're seeing the true Andrew in that context. And it's a video that we take in our heads because that's where we want to make sure you end up being. Because what happens for many is they put on their presentation hat and they change, they shrink and they become all very serious and what have you. It's like, Andrew, you were really interesting before. Now you're as boring as you know what. That's the Andrew we want to show up. So that is a starting point in a coaching context. Then obviously we've got to think about the audience. Who are they? Why are they there? Why are you needing to or wanting to engage with them and talk to them? What's the intended outcome, as I said? And you used a great word before. How do you want them to feel after this? And then we do a quick work through the key messaging. And then it's okay, build the support material. But then we think about rehearsing and getting people to practice in being themselves. I mean, there's an irony here. See, even rehearsal needs to be repositioned in people's minds because rehearsal is not about learning it. Rehearsal's about...
It's about feeling and being it.
Yeah, and a bit of muscle memory. I mean, it's a really simple example, but I say to everyone, look, in rehearsal you might say good morning everyone. On the day you might say, hey team, because that's just what feels right at the time. I'm loosey-goosey. So people often ask me, about this whole learning. When a tennis player is on the practice court, an elite tennis player is on the practice court for days leading into a tournament, they're not trying to recreate how a match is going to go. They're just getting the body equipped to be able to then play whatever then comes their way.
Yeah. And that's the beauty, that's the dance when you get to a level of competency with presenting, where you've got some experience, you've got a story and some slides or some bullet points that you put on a flip chart or some drawings, and then you dance with the audience.
Yeah,
and that's the bit that I love.
Cool. So you asked me before about walking away from slides. I'm saying ban longhand notes, right? Notes are okay. I tend to build slides. I mean, people often say to me, Tony, you never have notes. It's like, I always have notes because I will have slides, whether they be, I stood up in front of some bankers in India last year and I had photos of Shane Warne and photos of various things. But the point is, have slides. So have slides, but have slides that prompt you, they don't script you. So you're free with them.
We are so aligned. Let's go through that frame. 5 steps. The Tony Bulmer, 5 steps to delivering a kick-ass presentation. Number 1 is you check in with how a person feels. So if you're doing this yourself, self-coaching, how do you feel about presenting? What's your experience like? What's the emotion or the anxiety around that? Yep. Step 2, who's the audience? What is the conference? What's the context? What are the outcomes you're wanting to achieve?
Am I challenging them? Am I disturbing them?
Okay. So that's a level deeper. That's the... I'll say in a briefing with Laura, my EA, with a keynote briefing, after I've presented, what does success look like? What do you want people feeling, doing, thinking and saying? That's the emotional shift. Yep. I like that. 3 is then you look at key messages. It's a really different way you reverse engineering compared to what most people do. 4, then you look at support material. So support material.
Well, probably even before that, Andrew, what proof do I need? And it gets into the territory of stories, right? So stories is a very broad word and it's a buzzword.
Key messages, that includes proof and stories.
Proof and stories, right? What stories do they need to hear? What examples are... So I talk about personal stories, anecdotes, analogies. I talk about case studies. I mean, that's a business term that everyone uses. The case studies are stories. And stories are... I mean, it's a buzz term these days, but people don't understand how powerful they are. I see a lot of presentations where there aren't any case studies, and it's like, hang on, you're pitching to me, you're putting an idea. I want to know, has this worked before. I always say to people, you never want to be the first knee for a knee surgeon, right? Because that's going to be a big scar.
Where's your evidence?
So, where's your evidence? Exactly. So storytelling's and storytelling's fun, right? And then the last part of it is I want to say to people, I want to flip it, because all presentation skills coaching is very about audience. It's like, no. Andrew, let's think about how can you selfishly have some fun giving this? Because if you're not enjoying having this conversation with this audience, you can bet London to a brick they're not going to have much fun listening to you.
Yeah, so if you're having fun, they'll have fun.
Yeah.
That's a good frame. How are you feeling? Who's in the audience? Why? What are the outcomes and the emotional responses? Key messages. Look at stories in that. Look at proof. Then you put all your support material together. Most people listening to this who are relatively new in presenting, I think they'll go to step 4 first. And that's where you trip up. And then 5, proactively be yourself. Again, checking. This is almost just like a coaching session as well as having a conversation to check whether I'm doing the right stuff. When I teach people in my team to present, I go, be yourself and ramp it up about 20%.
Totally. And I think you've got to dig under that a bit more to help people, because people sort of go, yeah, but I've got to be professional. The word professional is a crazy word. We all want to be it, and that's fine. But what does that mean? And I think so many of us grow up confusing being professional with just being very serious and rather solemn. Personality engages. Being word perfect doesn't engage. I mean, I meet people who I look at. In fact, a person came on screen. I'm about to start coaching this person. One of the banks, very interesting woman. I won't go into too much detail here, but she's quirky, right? And she's trying to figure out whether she's a good fit for a large corporate entity. Now, I'm looking at her and thinking, businesses need people like this. She's super smart. They know that, but she's interesting. As soon as she came on screen for a one-on-one meet and greet with me, I thought, I really like you. My challenge is to make sure that when she presents, that's who's turning up. If she can do that, now it's not about this whole extrovert, introvert. You have to have a big, strong voice. That's all old thinking. You don't have to be. I remember saying to a client years ago who had briefed me on a guy in an investment management business, and they said, look, he is introvert, he's a nerd, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I spent days with him, coaching him as part of a small group, and I went back to the client, and I told him I was going to do this. And I said, look, I don't think he's your man to stand up in front of 500 people at an investment conference. But if you need, and this is back in the days when there was a fair bit of this happening, if you want a lunchtime client boardroom host lunch in your offices, he is absolutely your man. All we had to do was get him better organised in his head with the structure of his content. He had a really quirky personality, great sense of humour. He was so engaging. So it is a bit horses for courses. Not everyone's capable of standing up in front of 500 people. Not everyone needs to. But people can, when they are being themselves, be seriously engaging.
And what you're doing, what this process is doing, is giving them a confident structure to fall back on. I just sort of...
And we're also trying to unlock them. We're not trying to change them. And that's a cute phrase, but it's the truth.
Yeah.
I've told you this story before. So a client of mine a few years ago now, CEO of the Australian operation of a global firm, going through massive transformation, and he was not well known by all and sundry within the business. 2-day offsite. He asked me to work with his team throughout that offsite. He spoke on day one, amongst other things, a very high-performance guy. But one of the things he touched on was the whole work-life balance. Now, I hung out with, he had 80 of his top leaders in the business listening to this for 2 days. I said to him at lunchtime on day 2, it didn't land. They don't believe you, right? Which is a strong thing to say. I said, they like hearing you say it, but they know work's got to come first. And I said, there's a story you have to tell. And he knew what I meant because I'd heard it from him. He stood up at the closing remarks later on day 2, and not a slide in tow, not a note. And he said, I know some of you don't really believe what I said yesterday about work-life balance. He said, let me tell you about my dad. And I'm getting funny now, Andrew, because he talked about how he was on a plane for work and his dad passed away. Now, the point wasn't that, you can't travel for business. He was just saying, I get it. We've all got loved ones and families and other priorities outside of work. That was the moment when the regard for him as a leader skyrocketed. And of course, he is now the global CEO.
And I would tease out that the biggest difference he made was not more product knowledge, not more sales. not going to MBA or Harvard or INSEAD and doing a master's, but he just became comfortable in his own skin, told authentic stories, and he connected with hearts and minds.
And my hardest part of coaching him, I coached him for a number of years, was because he said, I got angry with him one day in the boardroom. I'm come from the same school of feedback as you do. And
do you ask permission or do you just give it?
I do ask permission these
I do
days.
now because I've given it without
I didn't
asking.
always, yeah, it doesn't work. See, we've learned, right?
People
We've
look at you
learned.
like, you arrogant asshole.
Yeah. Well, actually, I've learned it with my kids more than anything. That if you are, and people never say no, right? But he was interesting because he was incredibly humble, right? So he was a very private man. Well, he is a very private man generally. And he said to me, Tony, but why would people be interested? And it's like, they want to know who you are as a human. I mean, I hear in India, in particular, India and Asia, where I'm working with, professional firms, and they talk about this term called executive presence. And I laugh because I know what they mean by it. And I say to them, executive presence is not about an expensive suit and a big title. It's about, you can wear whatever you want to wear, but it's about who are you as a human, and whether I'm 3 layers down or 23 layers down, do I relate to you? Do I feel comfortable? Do I trust you? It always comes back to this trust concept, Andrew. And for that to happen, these people have got to give a little bit of themselves.
So it's really clear, those steps: be authentic and be yourself, and ask other people if you're not sure. Like, what is it about me you think connects? I've seen that work well with others. When I was
you know what's interesting on that, though? Just a quick comment. You're a high performer. The hardest part of feedback to high performers is telling them what's working, because they always want to know, but what can I do better? What can I do better? And it's like, Andrew, when you do this, you're amazing, but you're probably not doing it enough. So we often coach to people's strengths and say, okay, your eye contact's a bit, average. That doesn't matter. You're not overly animated, but that's just the way you are. But don't worry about it, because we're trying to break down this prescriptive. You must be this, you must be that. But when you start telling stories, when you start having a little bit of a laugh at your own expense, what have you, you're just so engaging. People love you. So it's getting people to listen to the strengths. I've seen people write down my feedback, and it's first of all positive and then areas to improve. Often at the end, the strengths is empty. You go, you haven't heard a word I've said. So Andrew, you're not writing this down. Write it down, type it, whatever. I don't care.
Yeah. So focus on what you're doing well.
Focus on what you're doing well and do it more. There's some things in life I'm terrible at, but I tend to play in the space where there's a few things, fortunately, you might not know, that I'm reasonable at. I play in that space.
Well, I had some coaching. I was in Hobart. So I'm going back, when I first worked with Lorraine Merritt, and I'll make sure I get this to Lorraine Merritt. She was at NIDA acting school, and she worked with actors. I was starting to do a lot of presenting, and I was getting a really hoarse voice. I was really talking up here, so I've learned through Lorraine to like, you got a baritone voice. You got a voice for radio.
Great head for radio.
Not a head. I said a voice.
Yeah, I've heard it before. I give the feedback here, not you. Okay.
But I had to work to get that resonance and depth in my voice, and Lorraine was great for that. I'll still do some of the trills before a big keynote. So to warm up my voice. So I learned stuff from Lorraine 25 years ago that I still use now. That really helped me then. Potentially a provocative question for you. I see a lot of people go and get people like Lorraine. So for me, she was great because she taught me to ramp up my energy, but to still be authentic. But I see some people, and I know they've been to acting school or they've done a presentation course. And like, I do this, I've learnt, but I think it's more natural. So people are often taught, step forward to the audience when you're going to make a point. Look up to the right when you're looking forward, look to the left when you're looking back. So you've got all that stagecraft, or you'll actually mirror it. What do you think about when actors come into corporates and teach them to ramp up their presentation skills?
So if I sat here and said it doesn't work, I would be wrong, because for some people it works well. Those people typically are naturally quite animated people. Okay, so that stagecraft then comes relatively easily. For people who are not that way, it's not going to help them. The story it's a horrible story, when a client told me of their experience working with an actor, because acting's acting. I mean, acting is a wonderful craft, but it is acting, right? It's being someone else. It is what it is. And this guy was reasonably introvert, reasonably quietly spoken, super nice guy, very interesting person, but as part of trying to build his physical presence, the coach made him, and half our listeners and viewers won't know who I'm talking about here, but there was a show in the, 80s, 70s maybe, Sale of the Century, Tony Barber, who was a marvellous host.
Sale of the Century.
That's it. And he used to run on to the stage. And so this coach made this guy run from outside the boardroom into the boardroom in the workshop to try and it's horrible.
I feel like I need a shower.
It's disgusting. It's terrible. And it put him back.
So this guy's an introvert.
Yeah.
Doesn't like presenting, and he made him go, hey.
And so that put him back years. I mean, I'm often trying to undo previous coaching. And that sounds arrogant.
No, tell me more about that.
Well, it's trying to undo this perception of, but I've got to be loud, I've got to move around more. And I mean, if you can do it naturally, great. But if it's not who you really are, then don't do it.
So the title that makes me shiver when someone says, if I fake it, then I'll make it.
No, it's terrible. Absolutely not. So one of the things, and you know, it's interesting. I mean, we always get people to present business topics when we're coaching them, top and tail, but we also play in non-business topics. But we go into very specific non-business topics because we always find out what we call their personal library, which is partly for them to reference for analogies and what have you. But I want to know what really floats your boat outside of work. When you see people present on those topics, Andrew, I have been in tears on countless occasions over the years, listening to people talk about, you know, how they've adopted children or whatever the case may be. And it's like, okay, so there's the real Andrew. Why is that Andrew not representing the firm that way? Or why are you not talking to the troops that way? So we trick people to find their real self.
If I present the real Andrew, I might get locked up.
Well, that's a separate issue. But it is what it is, right? It's people are... Andrew, you know, so I've shifted my wording around this and my view around this. I've always talked about two brands. I've always said there's organisational brand and there's personal brand. Organisational brands, big brands, we can all name them. They get you indoors that are fantastic, great. And titles often help with that. Once you're in the door, I can't see all those resources that you can talk about. All I can see is you. I used to say the personal brand is as important. It's not true. The personal brand at that point is more important. It's the one brand that is truly unique. It's the only brand that's truly unique. And yet we go to such great length to sanitize it and look the same, turn up in navy suits and look like a corporate professional, and you're walking away from your horsepower.
I hear you, and I've known you for a number of years. You are more passionate.
You admit to that, I don't. But anyway, that's a separate issue.
You're more passionate, more purposeful than you've ever been. So why don't people just do this? Because you make it sound just so, not easy, because you've got to do the work, and I'm not going to use the word easy, but you make it so structured. I wish I'd met you in my 20s, 30s. So I had people like Lorraine and some others that helped. But God, I could have fast-tracked that 15 years. What's stopping people? What is the number one block to people going through this process, being more authentic, embracing that presenting? There's this block, right? I'm not a presenter. I'm not going to get up on stage and speak in front of thousands. No. But every time you're in a meeting and they say, Jack, can you present? Raj, what do you think? You're on. It's a performance moment. Yeah. What's stopping people from embracing getting better in those even small moments to shine?
I just don't think they stop and think enough. Well, there's a couple of drivers, Andrew. They don't stop and think about what actually does it take to engage, and it's not the standing up straight, and that mentality's gone. Titles don't earn you respect anymore. Right? They just don't. You've got to show up and give a bit of yourself. And I think it's fear of doing the wrong thing and getting it wrong. And I mean, I coached a interesting example. I coached a CFO, a female CFO, a year ago. She was dynamite. Her board thinks she's fantastic. Her CEO thinks she's fantastic. Her peers think she's fantastic. Her troops think she's fantastic. The only person that was questioning whether she was right for the role was her, okay? We were rehearsing a presentation, and midway through it, she stopped and I'll use the word faltered. That's what she thought. What's the word I'm looking for here? I'm trying to replicate what she actually did. And she found the word, and she then kept going. We spoke about it afterwards, and I said, how was that for you? And she said, I spent the next 10 minutes thinking about how the board will think I'm hopeless and don't know what I'm doing. And I said, can I give you my perspective? And I'm not a rose-coloured glasses feedback guy, right? I'm pretty honest with people. I'm very honest with people. And I said, I sat there and thought, I'm listening to someone who absolutely knows their stuff inside out and who can also think on their feet. I think you're amazing, right? But it's breaking down these...
But because she wasn't pitch perfect.
Correct.
What was that? You
correct.
Then went,
correct.
okay, you're real.
She's nimble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rather than acting and reciting word for word, scene for scene.
So before we can coach people successfully, we've got to redefine what does success look like. And that's the biggest challenge. And then organisations have got to, what leaders in businesses have got to start to do more is trust their people. I mean, we hear all the time, oh, that's not how you should say it, that's not how you should say it, or that's not the way I would have said it. It's like, no, it probably isn't. I have this in my own business. I mean, I've got a team of people around the world who I want consistency of message, but they're not going to use my stories, my analogies. And one of my colleagues years ago, I laughed at, she's wonderful. And
they shouldn't be using your stories because that's authentic to you.
But there was one, she said, she'd been with me for about 10 years and she said, Tony, we're having an offsite. And she said, you know that story, that the golf analogy you use with the flag to talk about focus? She said, I use it every time we do a coaching session. But she said, I still don't understand what it means.
Well, either do your clients.
Yeah, that's right. Why are you using it? So you've got to trust people to find their own voice, their own stories, and tell them their way.
Great segue into virtual presentations.
Yes.
This room we are currently recording in live was our studio. We spent 2 years almost in here, didn't we? Because when the Australian government said you're WFH, working from home with COVID in 2020, like my bookings, we lost 93% of bookings, bang like that. So we had to totally reinvent, and we moved in here. So behind you, there's a green screen. We do a 3-camera shoot. We set a flip chart. Now that's after doing hundreds and hundreds of virtual presentations. But my goodness, we had some learning. They were horrible to start with. Like the
have you seen my videos from that period? Absolutely terrible.
Well, yeah, I think you've got to be really bad to then just get shitty average, to get average, to get good and do the reps and sets. So what I wanted to ask is everything we've spoken about getting ready for a presentation. So what's the feel, the audience and the outcomes and the key messages and the stories around that? What's your support material and how do you be yourself and have a bit of fun and play? Is that exactly the same through the camera as it is in a live audience?
So if you'd asked me that question 10 years ago, I would have said no. And I would have said, if you'd said to me, Tony, you should be coaching people all around the world, using virtual, I would have said, Andrew, you've got no idea. I'm an in-room guy. It's the only way to do it.
Well, every time I see you, it's normally in a coffee shop in Northbridge when I'm there with my kids.
I think you're stalking me.
But you've just done an online presentation. So your business is now 24/7 global and you live in Sydney.
Yeah. And so we've given clients the option now of in-room. Everything we can do in-room, we can do virtually. Is it the same? Look, it's not the same, but nothing's the same. But it's really good.
The same, I mean, is the preparation process the same?
Same. And you've got to show up being you and probably give a little bit more. I mean, I find it exhausting in a sense.
I find, if you've got an audience and you're looking at a camera, if I'm in here and we've got the TV set up and I can see an audience, at least I've got some visual feedback and some auditory feedback if it's live as well. So I can get that two-way communication. The ones that I find really draining
when you can't see
is
them.
when you can't see. And
so
you're
I agree
just
with that.
talking to a screen. And I finish those and I'm wrecked.
I agree with that. And because I've always said, we talked about being audience-centric earlier. I mean, just sending nods, frowns, whatever, you're getting a response back. So it is much harder. But then I've thought about this, and there's a guy, I'm sure you know him, Ben Crow, who I think is very interesting. And he talks about caring less about the outcomes. And he's not saying don't care. He just says care less about, in a sporting context, the scoreboard. Focus on your process, what you do. So it's harder, there's no question, when you can't see the audience. But I presented to some people in France about 11 o'clock at night about 12 months ago, and I couldn't see any of them. And it was a first meeting, and there was a team of them, there was about 25 of them, and I thought, I don't know how this is going. But I trusted myself and did what I do normally, and I thought, I'll just see how it lands. Well, it landed really well. Would I have enjoyed it more if I could see the feedback instantaneously? Absolutely. But again, there's a theme with me, trust. Trust your process. Trust the way that you've shown up for the last, 2 years, 3 years, 20 years, whatever, you know it works, keep doing it.
What I did when we were starting to present a lot, and we sold a few big contracts, so doing regular presentations to help people, because the energy levels, mental health were struggling as a nation. Globally, actually, we're doing a lot of global work during COVID. And after the first couple we did, and I thought, God, they were boring, and it wasn't like anything that I can create or orchestrate when it's live. So I sat down in here after one presentation very early and went, how do we bring this alive? Like, what do I know? Where can I draw from? And I just went, at that stage, I've been doing live TV for at least 10, 11, 12 years. Today's Show, and then it moved towards doing regular segment on ABC News Breakfast. And I just thought, I know how to do this. Because when you watch Michael and Virginia on the couch, they'll anchor it and host, and then they'll go to breaking news. So PK might come on and do the sport. Then we'll go to weather with Nate, and then we'll go a colour story, and then just Trump's done something. So there's this oscillation or a pulse. I just went, that's how we're going to do virtual training. So you put in polls, you put in questions, and you change your pace. And then we started getting feedback. I can't believe that hour went so quick. Yeah. And our business exploded because we brought some of those mechanics and storytelling and real life to a virtual room. And then I just changed totally then and thought, wow, how blind have I been?
It's a great opportunity.
Thinking I can't
There's a missing ingredient in there, Andrew, and that is and it comes back to this audience centricity. And even if you can't see them, I mean, hopefully you can hear them in most cases. Most virtual presentations, you can get a verbal response or even a written, but to stop and check in. I talk about check-ins all the time. I mean, I see most people aren't natural pausers, generally. You and I are talkers, right? You've got to get people to understand why pause. One of the reasons for pausing is gaps for questions, create space. Now, in a room, people will say, hang on, Andrew, let me interrupt you. But in virtual, most audiences find it more difficult to jump in. The easiest way for an audience to stay engaged is to participate. Let them ask. Let them talk to you. And what you then do is you get some feedback. So just to ask, is everyone comfortable with where I'm coming from? Are there any questions here? And you'll get, and I say to presenters, listen to the question, right? Really listen, because you'll get questions a lot like, Tony, I'm interested in what you're saying. It is interesting, but I do have a question around or a concern around. Now, a lot of people hear the second half of that question, the concern. I love the first part because they're saying, Tony, I'm interested in what you're saying. The fact that they're going to challenge me or question me on a point of view, fine, let's do that. But I always say, Andrew, your audience is your best friend. The other interesting thing about virtual, I mean, go back to, I talked about, sanitized. I'm not a big fan of corporate slides, backgrounds, corporate logos.
Thank you for saying that.
Right. Just, I don't need that to know who I'm talking to, right? Be in your normal environment, be in your boardroom, your business environment. If you are presenting from home, look, okay, I mean, sometimes, we've got, you don't want to have a pile of dirty washing behind you. I remember a story I love. I remember coaching someone and meeting them for the very first time. And this was during COVID, I think. And his office was in his garage. And he had, in the background, huge weights. I didn't know this man from Adam. I knew his name, right? And he came on screen, and this wasn't planned. I mean, you don't script this stuff. I just said, whatever his name was, Fred, let's say. I said, Fred, I can't coach you. And he looked at me like, my God, Tony, what are you saying to me? I said, Fred, I can't coach you. If you can lift those weights that are behind you, I don't want to coach you. I'm scared of you. I'm in fear already. We had this most joyous conversation for 5-10 minutes or so talking about his health regime and fitness and what have you. Of course, I was being a cheeky sod.
You broke down that wall of engagement and he saw you were normal.
We're seeing inside people's homes. I mean, talk about intimacy. I mean, that's pretty cool, right? So let's call it for what it is. Let's use it.
Just on that question, I love that you reinforce that. I'll look at an energy map when I'm doing live and virtual. I think it's even more important. So purposely, bang, 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 show a video, poll, get people active, drop and pause. Hey, I'd like everyone to know in the chat room, or if you've got a producer, we'll often say, Ange, can you get someone, put your hand up online? All right, Michelle, you've got a question. And then you actually drop and you have a one-on-one conversation with Michelle. There can be 1,000 or a couple of thousand or a few hundred people. So you're really dropping the energy and then going again. Yeah. That took a while to get the confidence to do that. Now, you also need a good team and good skills around the tech. But gosh, it changes the presentation.
Well, so interesting. We have a very large financial services client in the US, and we were brought in to work with them specifically on institutional tenders, pitches that they were making externally. We have banned them using they talk about finals pitches. We have banned 2 words, pitch and presentation. By the way, some of these are being done in room wherever they can get it, but a lot of the times the clients, America's a big place. It's just easier and cheaper to say, no, present to us virtually. We're not going to fly our team in together. They have to call them finals conversations. Because what they were doing is they were going in, the lovely people, but when they were going into pitch mode, they were going into one-way streets.
Press play, yeah.
Yeah. It's like...
Isn't that interesting, the power
have
of
a conversation with your client. Yeah, it reframed it for them. They were having conversations every other day, but when the stakes were at the highest, they were talking at people, not with them.
Do you know Vin Jiang?
Because you've mentioned Vin, I do.
Yeah, so for anyone watching this or listening, if you haven't heard of Vin, it's spelt V-I-N-H, Jiang, which is spelt G-A-N-G. He's an award-winning keynote speaker and communicator. I started speaking on the keynote circuit 15 plus years ago. I did a gig in Adelaide. It was Vin's and both of us, it was in our first 5 presentations. At that stage, he
wasn't the Adelaide Fringe, I hope.
Wasn't, no, it was a bit more respectful. It was actually, I can remember, Phil Quinn Conroy, hello, the Prince, I'll make sure you get a copy of this, mate. The Prince booked me, PQC, and it was a road show, and I was just really stepping out of sport. I was still at New South Wales Cricket. I'd left the Aussie cricket team and was just starting to get a real job again. And Vin was doing magic, and his magic was okay and his presentations were okay. Fast forward 10 years, so I saw him about 3-4 years ago. I went, oh my God, his stuff has exploded. But he's a master online. So if you look him up, he's got 3 million YouTube followers, 5.5 million followers on Instagram, and 2.3 on TikTok. A lot of his work is around virtual and social media with short, sharp messages, really resonating with what you're saying. So let's have a look or a listen to one of the segments Vin does about being your authentic self.
And I see this all the time. People are so afraid of what other people think that they will do whatever other people want, and those people don't care about you and they'll forget about you anyway. If you try to please everyone, you will end up pleasing no one. The person willing to state the truth and be themselves, very powerful. Whereas the person that allows every other person to dictate what they do does not have power.
Vin's a bit younger than you and I, so he's got the YouTube gang and TikTok.
I didn't pick up on that, Andrew, but I'll take your word for it.
So what are your thoughts on researching? So my young fella Archie, he's nearly 14. He said to me recently, and I had to stop and pause before commenting because I thought, wow, it is true. He said, Dad, TikTok is actually really educational, and I search a lot of content now on TikTok because I asked him a question and he came back and he got it on TikTok. What are your thoughts on getting content, searching on social media platforms like TikTok?
To get advice on your presentation?
Or to get content for your presentation?
Yeah, but again, not to write it for you. To search for info. I mean, it's just like, the encyclopedias, Andrew, that we grew up with. I mean, whatever reference material.
Thomas, back in the old days,
there were books.
Mum and Dad used to buy books. They'd knock on the door and go, hi, we're here selling. And isn't it just, I think about that, it's so archaic. So you don't recommend people going to TikTok to get content?
No, get content, but you still got to then put it into your words. You've still got to put it into your context.
I said earlier, your energy, your enthusiasm, your passion, it's like you've just started this. I've known you for a number of years, but why are you so juiced about this more than ever? And you've been doing this for decades. It's obviously, you're aligned to purpose. We could get deeper on all that, and it's your calling. Yeah. But what's happened with you where you've gone, I just feel I'm totally on this planet to give people this message? Because I feel it.
Well, thank you. It is my jam. But why do it? So I guess there's 2 sides to it. I look at the stress that trying to be the perfect presenter, which is not the best presentation anyway, but I see the stress that people carry, and I think, well, I want to help people not have stress. You don't need to have that stress. The flip side of it is when you see someone who can really, really engage people, and it doesn't matter whether it's 1-on-2 or 1-on-200, doesn't matter. They are the leaders that make a difference in the world. I meet a lot of, Andrew, people that are so much more clever than I am, possibly even more clever than you, but they're not maximizing their ability, their knowledge, their insights because of their communication skills. I just want to help those people be better at being themselves.
It's a good mission.
I'm working on it.
Storytelling. And I do want to talk about crafting a good story. Now, yes, you could probably write in some content and AI can push it back. But I still think when someone stands on stage or in a small boardroom or on a camera for an audience, large or small, and there's an authentic story, like when you said your colleague was trying to tell your story about golfing and putting in, like it's a story, an authentic story is yours. And if anyone else tells it, it'll come up as being inauthentic.
Totally.
So talk to me about storytelling.
So we love coaching people to play in that space, and I mentioned before the exercise around personal library, and so we help people with analogies. Analogies are incredibly sticky, they're powerful, they help take complex content and simplify it. So we get people to try and find their thing. So, we just ask people to write down what are the 5 things they're into, and it can be mountain biking, it can be whatever. It doesn't matter, stamp collecting, and help them. There's a great little structural tool Dale Carnegie came up with years ago, IPB, incident. So incident saying, look, guys, let me just digress for a moment, but I'm into live music. I actually collect live albums rather than studio albums. So that's explaining the incident. IPB. P is the point about live music for me is there's always something different. There's a guest artist, or there's an acoustic version of a song that was heavily instrumentalized when it was in the studio. And the B is benefit stroke relevance. The relevance of that to us is we've got to think about our business strategy from a different perspective. I'm making all this up as I say it, but it's that simple, right? Now, Andrew, when people are talking about things that, I am a live music nutter. I just my playlists are all live. It's easy to tell. I don't have to write notes on that. It's just I've got to think about what's the relevance of this. So people often aren't used to doing that. But that's the key. The other part with two other parts with storytelling I would add in. Is there a generic structural tool? I've just done a video on for Vanguard, funnily enough, in the US, on storytelling technique, and I said to them, "There's a structure, because what's a story? A poem, a song, a movie, a TV commercial, a present. Everything is a story." They all have one thing in common. They all have a start, they all have a middle, and they all have an end. Most presenters go wrong because they get stuck in the middle. They don't set it up very well, and they certainly don't bring out, they spend often too long because they're excited about the story. I could tell you about my playlist of live music for hours, right? So I get caught in that, and people are sitting there going, why is he telling us this? What's the point here? So make them short, but have an end. You've got to hear yourself using words like, the relevance of that to us here from a business perspective is. So it's like your punchline. So that's one point about stories. The other point that I think is really crucial, and often this happens naturally, but it's still got to be thought about, is what I call emotional alignment, which sounds really complicated, and it's incredibly basic, because I make the point that there should be a difference in the demeanour of a presenter between bad news and good news, or between problem and solution. And again, in the context of being professional presenters, I hear a lot of, and men are probably worse at this than women, where they leave their emotional sort of gauge outside of the room. And it's like, okay, the problem that we're talking about here is pretty serious, it's pretty grave, we've got to fix this, otherwise we're going to be in a bit of trouble. That's a serious face. If you're pitching to me a solution, and particularly one that you've seen work in another context, that should be smile from ear to ear. Tony, we know this can work. We've seen it work. I hear a lot of presentations where the content of the story, I know what they're saying, but I can't see that emotional color coding, as I often call it, from the presenter. And the reason I call it emotional alignment, Andrew, is because guess what? It's not acting. This is actually sitting down at your desk and saying, am I delivering shitty news here, or am I delivering good news? Well, actually, you know what? I'm delivering both. And so I need to reflect that. And this is the job. And this is, if we go back to where this conversation started, slides don't do this, scripts don't do this. This is the human element that will never go away. But you've got to bring it.
Can I put you on the spot to bring it?
Go on.
Can we see an example, hear an example of those 3 things wrapped in together? Dale Carnegie's IPB. Can you tell a story where it builds in incident, point, and benefits, that we can see the start, the beginning, and the end, and we can also feel the emotional alignment?
It's hard. So what lets me down here is my memory, Andrew. So I told you the story before about the CEO telling the story of his dad passing away, right? So there was, people were I mean, I can't replicate the exact way he told it, but he sort of went into it a bit cold turkey. I remember him coming back from the break and he said, I need to share something with you. And so there was a sense of them sitting there thinking, one, this is pretty grave, and secondly, why is he telling us this? So there's a bit of theatre here, right, that tell the incident, then make the point, I felt really bad because I was away when Dad passed. Why am I sharing this with you? And they all relaxed. But it was so powerful, so powerful.
As you're saying that now, going back to what you told me, I'm running that filter. You can see the clear delineation.
Yeah. It's simple. It's not. This is not rocket science. I saw another story or another presentation recently, which was, I mean, man, I need to carry a box of tissues all the time, Andrew, because it was a very blokey room. It was a manufacturing business, and the reality was it was a very blokey room. There was about 40 men in a room where one of the franchisees of this global brand, I won't mention them, was pitching to the corporate entity in Australia why they should set up a high-performance superstore to demonstrate to customers, mums and dads at a retail level, what the power of their products. There was a lot of pushback on this idea. Early in his presentation, he went again, cold turkey, he went with no explanation. He just said, I need to share something with you. Most of you don't know that I, in my younger years, was a ski patroller here in Australia. And doing that voluntary role, I was involved in a situation where a person, a man, a husband, father of kids, ran into a tree, and my team and I, it happened on our duty, on our watch, and I'm being very serious as I tell this, because I can tell you, the room, you could have heard a pin drop. And they had no idea where this was going. And he said, I'm going to be very, very graphic with you. And I'm sorry if I upset anyone. So he was very respectful the way he told us, but he said, when we got to this guy, half his head was torn away. Now, he fairly quickly told us that this man survived. In fact, he met him again 2 years later, because we were all sitting there thinking, my God, this is terrible, right? He was ultimately talking about high-performance teams. Now, I did what I said to you earlier. I looked around this room of blokes. Half the room were in tears. He didn't need a slide. He didn't need any pictures to exemplify this. He just told this story. And then he brought it back to the reason why high performance is going to make a difference to our business is they signed on the day. It's the power of storytelling. But it was all true. There was nothing made up there.
So you can have great 5-step process we spoke about to get your presentation ready. You can have done lots and lots of presentations, but what I'm taking out of this, it's backing up my belief on this. So you sometimes search for information to back it up, right? If you can tell stories that are powerful, meaningful and authentic, your message is going to stick so much more than any other format.
And therefore, not always, because a lot of businesses have an array of case studies that maybe not all that the people have been involved in. But as a general comment, look to tell your stories, because you'll always tell those more easily, right? So that's a good thing, and more authentically.
There might be someone listening or watching going, but no one wants to listen to my stories, Tony. They're boring. Do you hear that a bit?
Yeah, of course. So in that room that I just talked about, a lot of those blokes had known this guy for years. They didn't know that he was, a ski snow patrol guy, volunteer. And even, so this sounds contrived, Andrew, but even the fact that he was a volunteer, that was actually, in a very subtle way, saying something about his personal brand. It was saying he was a good egg, right? And so people go, okay, I believe people like you. So, and that sounds terribly contrived, but organisations, I've often said this, organisations spend lots of time, and rightly, I'm not being cynical here, time and money thinking about how their brand can be perceived in the market. We need to do the same thing. We need to think about, okay, what makes me tick? What are my values? And give a bit, because the more you give, the more you get back. So it's not your judgment to make. My CEO that didn't like talking about himself and told the story about his dad, he would always say, but Tony, no one's interested. I said, let others determine that. You know, by the way, when the board came to me to start working with that particular gentleman, they said, we don't understand him. We don't know him. We don't know if he's clever or because he's not clear with his communication. So his messaging was all skew. So we had to really help with him with the structural process, but we had to help him give a bit. And that was really uncomfortable for him.
This is really helping me.
I better send you an invoice.
He's sharp, isn't he, Wiz? I've coached 4 people now to CEO or chair roles. It's not something I advertise, but I help them uncover their story. And what you've done today is you've helped me articulate it a bit better.
And everyone's got a story, Andrew.
And with all these 4 people, they were highly intelligent, they were results driven, everyone knew that they were great performers.
Yeah, that's the easy part.
Feedback for all 4 of them, 3 men, 1 woman. We don't know you. Yeah. You don't really let your guard down. And they all struggled, but they all told an authentic story. And the feedback, especially one of them, I spoke about this, it's Marty Shepherd from KPMG, who's now the Asia Pac chair. He got a promotion just this week. And Marty was in this podcast, we spoke about it. And he just said, I got him to talk about his story. His father passed away when he was 18. And the feedback Marty had got is that he was the smartest guy in the room, or one of the smartest guys in the room, sharp, but he'd always work a million miles an hour, a little bit impatient, wouldn't listen to others. And he got to the finish line, but he's there by himself. So he got up and said, let me just share. We did a sort of timeline. He'd represented Australia as a young junior in canoeing, and hardly anyone knew that. So from a young age, I've loved competition. He showed a few pictures and everyone laughed because there was a bit of authentic there, big fuzzy hair. He said, the moment that really shaped my life more than anything is at 18, my father passed away. And when your father passes away at 18, especially when you're wired the way I am, you don't want to miss another moment in your life. So for anyone in this room, if I've ever come across as being impatient, running too fast and getting to the finish line without you,
you know why.
Now you understand why.
Yeah. And people love that. They accept that.
And what I ask for you, if I am chair, can you just be open with me and be authentic with me, and let's do this together. He had people, and I had people come up behind the scenes, a few knew I'd work with him, and said, oh my God, we found out about him and his personality.
See, Andrew, there's a myth about rapport building. People think that, just the other day, a woman in Melbourne said to me, Tony, who's in a senior role, Tony, I'm not into football. Right? So there's this perception that rapport is about finding common ground. Now, finding common ground is useful. The truth is there is always common ground. If you dig enough, there's always common ground. A better, faster way of building rapport is just to give a bit. I always say to people, especially leaders, give something to your audience that they wouldn't have expected to know about you, but in the context of the discussion we're having, it will change the game. You will move the rapport needle faster than you've ever moved it in your life.
As long as it's done authentically.
Of course.
Yeah. For those that want to engage you, how do we find you? Where do people contact you? How do they work with you?
Bulmer Group International on the website, bulmergroup.com. We're here anytime. info@bulmergroup.com. We will talk to them.
Awesome. Thank you. I've really enjoyed today.
Andrew, it's been a delight. Thank you.
A nice dance. And I've taken some good learnings. My learning is I'm going to use that framework more for my storytelling. I think I waffle a bit at the start sometimes, so I'm going to get more punchy in the setup of a story.
Good. I look forward to seeing more and more of you.
Thank you, mate.
Thank you, mate. Thank you.